r/nosleep. Posted by you/nslewis. My wife has a removable face. I've never glimpsed what lies beneath it, but my best friend has. Samantha told me about it on our third date. We were watching a movie on her couch when I made my move to kiss her. She whipped her hand in front of my face and blocked me. "There's something you need to know," she said. I braced myself. Here it comes. I'm not ready for a relationship. Nothing to do with you, of course. It was the absolute last thing that I wanted to hear, because I was already crazy about her. "Okay," I said. "I have a removable face." "That's a new one." "You have a what now?" I was about to laugh, but she was wearing a deadly serious expression. "I have a removable face." "Is that, like, a metaphor or something?" "No. My face is literally removable. Look. Closely." She lifted her chin and traced her jawline with a finger. "You can see the seam." After admiring how beautiful her neck was for a dizzying moment, I leaned in for an inspection. It was very hard to see, but it did look like there was a slightly unnatural transition there from her face to her throat. I grew dizzier, as a dozen questions rushed into my brain. "Don't bother asking why or how or anything like that," said Samantha. "I can't tell you that. If that's going to be a problem, you should leave now. I'm letting you know this because I like you, and I want to take the next step, but this is non-negotiable." "Okay," I said, unsure of what was happening. "Not a problem. So what? You have a removable face. Who cares? It looks good." "There's something else. Once a day, usually in the evening, I have to remove the face and disinfect the inside of it. If I don't, it will rot. This takes about an hour, give or take, depending on how my day went. During this time, you must never ever look at my real face. Never. Do you understand?" "Why, yes. Got it. Don't ask about it, don't look at your real face." Samantha stood up. "Now, I'm going to go into the bathroom and clean my face. That will give you plenty of time to think about what I've told you. If you're here when I'm done." "That's great. I would like that. But if you're gone, I'll understand." She turned and walked into her bedroom. I sat in stunned silence as I heard the bathroom door close. I gave the thing some serious thought. It was possible that it was a joke of some kind. It was possible that it was a delusion. Was it possible that it was true? Well, it was certainly possible to transform an actor's face with movie makeup, so I supposed it was possible that Samantha wore a removable face every day. Maybe she had had a horrible accident where her flesh had been mangled. Maybe her face had been melted by acid, or burned by fire, or the skin shorn off by heavy machinery. If it had, I would never know, because she would never tell me, and I would never see it. I pictured a face of raw, naked muscle, rotting away. Could I kiss her, if that was what I was kissing? But wasn't that what we all were, under the skin? Just muscle and bone and blood and squishy organs. I paced around the living room, running my hand through my hair. I liked Samantha, a lot. She was smart, and funny. And beautiful. But was that beauty real? Did it count? Did it matter if it was real or not? Was I being superficial even worrying about it? When she came out of the bathroom, I was still there. I looked at her face. She smiled and I was in love. We dated, we moved in together, we decided to get married. For the most part, it was a completely normal relationship, typical of two young people in love, building a life together. During the day, it was easy to forget about the face altogether. It looked natural enough, and only in certain positions, in certain lights, was there ever any indication that it wasn't natural. But every night was the same. Samantha would close herself in the bathroom, sometimes for an hour, sometimes for 2, and clean the inside of her face. The curiosity never left me. I would sit there and wonder what was under that face. I came so close to barging in on her a few times, but I never did. I did occasionally ask her about it. About what, if anything, had happened. About how it was possible to make the removable face look so real. About what it really looked like underneath. I tried to coax her into showing me, assuring her that I loved her no matter what, and didn't give a damn what her real face looked like. I was just curious, that's all. She never showed me, or told me the story behind it. She didn't get upset at me, unless I was really badgering her. She'd just shrug and say, "You know you can't see it. You know I can't tell you about it." I never told anybody about Samantha's removable face. It's not that she asked me not to. I just didn't think it was anybody's business. Except once, I did tell somebody. It was during my bachelor's party. We had rented several cabins in Big Sur and spent the night drinking and packing our noses with powders that we shouldn't have been packing our noses with. Everyone else had passed out and the sun was creeping up behind us as I stood on the majestic cliffs with my friend Chris, looking down on the Pacific waves crashing against the rocks. Chris was my best friend, as close to a brother as I'd known. We'd grown up together, and visited each other at college often, and spent the summers together. After college, we'd moved to different cities, but we stayed in close contact. Standing there on the cliffs, I told Chris about Samantha's removable face. At first, he thought I was joking. Then he had 1,000 questions, most of which I couldn't answer. What's underneath? I don't know, man. I don't know. Doesn't that drive you crazy, not knowing? I shrugged. Lots of stuff I don't know. Don't know how to do calculus, and I don't know what happens when we die. But dude, she's about to be your wife. And you don't even know what she looks like. I mean, I'd have to take a look. Like, you could set a camera up in the bathroom. That's where she does it, right? Set up a camera and have a look and then you'll know. I sighed. Yeah, it drives me crazy. I've asked her 1,000,000 times. But she told me I could never look. Gotta respect that, man, even if I don't like it. That's love. Chris laughed. You telling me to respect a woman? Up is down now. Then we fell back into talking about old times as a new day dawned. Chris was in town for business last week, and planned on spending the weekend at our house. The conversation at Big Sur had happened 4 years ago, and we hadn't spoken about Samantha's removable face since, despite keeping in close contact and seeing each other as often as two people transforming into adults in different parts of the country can. It happened on Saturday evening. We were lounging lazily in the backyard, deep into the beer, having just finished with some grilled steaks, when I got a text from work. God damn it, I groaned. I have to make a work call. Seriously? Said Samantha, raising an artificial eyebrow. On a Saturday night? My biggest client, baby. Sorry. It is what it is, I guess, said my wife. I'm going to head inside and get cleaned up. Chris? Are you okay just hanging out for a bit? Chris smiled. I'll be fine. Got my beer, got some weeds to pull in your garden. God knows your lazy ass husband isn't going to do it. Those tomatoes are choking to death. It's a tragedy. I rolled my eyes and went into the side yard to make my call. 15 minutes into it, I heard the screams coming from inside. Both my best friend and my wife were wailing in terror. I dropped the phone and ran into the house and down the hall to our bedroom. Through the open door, I could see that the door to the master bathroom was also standing open. Don't come in. Screamed Samantha. I don't have my face on. Call an ambulance. He looked. Oh God, he looked. She sounded desperate, and truly horrified. That made me desperate and horrified, and I wanted to rush into the bathroom, but I knew suddenly that that would be a mistake. I knew suddenly that Samantha didn't want me to look at her real face, not out of a sense of vanity, but for my own safety. Chris staggered backwards, out of the bathroom. He was holding a straightened out paperclip, which he had used to pick the privacy lock. Now he was stabbing it again and again into his eyes, shouting gibberish. He was clearly in the depths of madness, and it turned my stomach to see him mutilate himself. Call a fucking ambulance. My wife screamed. Don't come in here. He fucking looked. I turned and ran back to the side yard, where my phone was lying in the newly mowed grass. My client was still on the line, alarmed, asking what was happening, what all the screaming was. I hung up on him and called 911. When the paramedics arrived, Chris was having a seizure in the hallway. Samantha was stroking his head, sobbing. Her face was on, but it had been done hastily, and everything looked a little off. My world has been dark this past week. My best friend is in a psychiatric hospital under suicide watch. He's completely blind and mostly catatonic, except when he slips into a violent, babbling mania. The doctors are optimistic that his state is temporary, but they don't know the truth about what caused it, because I told the paramedics that Chris had taken a large dose of psychedelic mushrooms and fallen into psychosis. I saw no good reason to tell the truth about what had happened. Who would believe that one look at my wife's real face would make somebody insane? At best, we would be the subjects of a long investigation. At worst, we would have to prove that what we were saying was true, by showing somebody Samantha's face. Then the same thing would happen again, and what after that? I had no idea, and no interest in finding out. For Samantha's part, I knew that she would never consent to show anybody her real face, no matter what the consequences of refusal were. I did get a follow-up call from the police, asking me to confirm my story. The hospital found no traces of psilocybin in Chris's blood, though that's not unheard of, since it has a short half-life. If they end up testing his hair, I will likely be in a lot of trouble. But that's truly the least of my concerns. Samantha is in a state of her own. She still cleans the inside of her face, though not as regularly, and when she puts it back on, it's always crooked now. It is beginning to smell a little bit. I've tried to assure her that it wasn't her fault. He knew, I said. I told him that nobody was ever allowed to look at it. He knew, and then he broke into the bathroom. This is not on you, baby. Please. Talk to me. Not on me? That one look at my fucking face makes people insane? Please. I just need some time alone. As for me, I am doing my best to hold it together. Do you know what's strange, though? Despite what happened to Chris, I still find myself curious about what my wife's real face looks like. More curious than ever, really. Posted by nosleep. A man asked me to count his cows and my world forever changed. There's a place in New Hampshire, far from the madding crowd, where I used to go hiking alone. The only reminder of civilization I would encounter was a brief glimpse of a pasture where a few cows occasionally grazed. Somebody, I knew, must have owned those cows, and so somebody must have lived nearby. And one day, after passing the pasture, I met that somebody. He came running up behind me, shouting, "Sir! Sir! How many cows did you see? How many cows did you see, sir?" I stopped walking and turned with a smile. I lived and worked in the city, where the problems were Gordian knots of human entanglement, and gave you ulcers. This man here, standing in front of me in muddy overalls and heaving to catch his breath, had a much quainter problem. He had lost a cow, or so I figured. "I don't know," I said. "I didn't count them." "Would you, sir? Would you go back and count them?" I bit my lip to keep from laughing. "Sure thing, my man." "Thank you, sir." The man gushed as we walked together back down the trail toward the pasture. When we arrived, true to my word, I counted the cows. 12, I reported, turning to the man. "You've got 12 cows. You're certain? Could you count one more time, just to be absolutely sure?" I was a little insulted at the insinuation that I didn't know how to count, but I humored him. "Oh," I said, after taking a recount of the cows. "Guess I missed one. There's 13. 13 cows." I counted again. "Yep. 13 cows." The man groaned. "That's what I thought. Sir, I appreciate your time, and apologize for the intrusion." "Thank you." "That's it?" I asked. I had fully expected him to ask me help look for his missing cow, and was honestly a little disappointed that he hadn't. "Just count the cows?" "That's it," said the man. Unless you would like to hear something strange." I set my backpack on the ground, crossed my arms, and nodded. "Lay it on me." "I am not an educated man, sir, but I know my cows, and I am telling you, those are not my cows. Even if they were, they couldn't be. I only have 8 cows, not 13. There were 10 there this morning when I woke up. Now, as you can plainly see, there are 13. I thought perhaps I was losing my mind, but you can see them too. 13 cows. I studied the man, looking for some sign that he was putting me on. In my line of work, I often delivered very bad news to people, and the man looked now like those people usually looked when they heard the very bad news. "I almost wish I really had lost my mind," the man said. "That would at least make sense. Crazy old Abel, alone on his farm, imagining cows that aren't there. But this? Sir, I don't know what to make of this. Have you ever heard of such a thing? Cows appearing out of nowhere?" Abel scratched the back of his neck. Unless you're not real." "Well, sir, are you real?" It was an absurd question, but something about it chilled me, and made me take it seriously. Was I real? I looked my hand over and thought about it for a moment. "Yes," I said. "I'm real. Cogito ergo sum. I think therefore I am. Even if there is some evil demon tricking me into thinking that I exist, there still has to be something that he's tricking. I'm that something. Descartes figured all that out a long time ago." "Do you think it's the work of a demon, then?" asked Abel, his eyes opening wide. "I've done my best to live my life free of sin, sir, though I'm only human in the end. Perhaps this is my punishment for some misdeed I've committed." I considered the possibility, but not for long. Cows appearing out of nowhere as a punishment? No, that doesn't make sense. You're basically getting free cows, right? How is that a punishment? My senses were coming back, and I suddenly felt very silly for ever taking the man seriously. Silly, but I also pitied him. I imagined him living out there all alone, slipping into the early stages of dementia. He didn't appear to be that old, in his 50s, if I had to guess, but sometimes it happened at that age. One of my favorite authors, Terry Pratchett, Had developed Alzheimer's in his 50s. Listen, Abel, I said, I don't mean to be insulting, but are you quite sure that you only had 8 cows last night when you went to bed? Yes, said Abel. 8 cows. He then proceeded to list their names, from Adeline to Zelda. I know what you are getting at, sir. But I have evidence. He dug into his pocket and pulled out his phone. I photograph my cows every evening. You may think it's strange, and perhaps it is, but they're all I have anymore. Other people have friends and families to take pictures with, but I am all alone, other than my cows. So, look for yourself. I scrolled through dozens and dozens of photos, checking their timestamp. There were definitely 8 cows in each picture, going back until a month before, when there were 9. That 9th was Bertha, said Abel as his eyes grew a little watery. She was a good girl. But look here. He zoomed in on one of the cows. That's Lacey. See that unusual spot on her, shaped like a bird? Now look at the cows that are here, and tell me if you see that spot. These are not my cows. I looked up from the picture and examined the cows in front of me. I couldn't find the mark on any of them. That was disturbing enough. But there was something even more disturbing. Abel? Yes, sir. I see it too. There are 14 cows now. I'm sure there's a completely normal explanation, I said, not at all sure about that. I tried to suppress the creeping sense of terror worming its way into my head and think rationally. The cows probably just came over from a neighboring farm. That 14th cow was probably just hiding behind a tree and we didn't see it till just now. That's what it is. Sir, the closest dairy farm is in Lancaster. A cow would grow lame and collapse in the mountains before she made it from there to here. I needed to sit down, and crouched in the dirt, trying to come up with some other line of reasoning. Maybe some teenagers were playing a prank on the poor farmer? It would be an elaborate prank, requiring heavy machinery, but wasn't it possible? I looked out at the cows. Other than the mystery of where they came from, something about them seemed off. I stared at them as they stared back at me, and it took me a long time to figure out what was wrong. But then I had it. Abel? Cows are supposed to blink their eyes, right? Yes, sir. That is the truth. Well, these ones aren't blinking. Watch. Abel squinted and scrutinized one of the cows. Well, I'll be, he said, frowning. That's when one of the unblinking cows laid down on the ground and started panting heavily. It looked like it was going to die. She's in labor, said Abel. Labor, as in she's about to give birth? Yes, sir. She's ready to pop all right. Fluid started pouring out of the thing's rear end, and I felt queasy in my city boy stomach. All told, the event did not take long at all, less time than we spent staring in dumb shock at what the cow had given birth to. Finally I spoke. Correct me if I'm wrong, Abel, and I'm certainly not an expert here, but cows don't typically lay eggs. Is that right? That's right, sir. Never seen a cow lay an egg in all my years. The egg was as large as a basketball, and neon green. It started rattling around in the grass. What the fuck is going on? I whispered. What the fuck is going on here? Abel opened his mouth, thought better of it, and closed his mouth. The cow that had given birth to an egg stood up like nothing had happened and started chewing on some grass. Part of my brain was screaming at me to keep walking the miles to my car, get inside, drive off, and forget the whole thing. But the larger part was gaping at the non-blinking cows, and the egg, and wondering what it all meant. That wasn't a rhetorical question, Abel, I said. Do you have any theories about what's going on here? Abel sighed and looked down at his muddy boots. Sir, did I ever tell you what happened to my wife? Not the rumors that pass around town, but the truth of the matter? I bit off the sarcastic reply that was forming in my mouth. We had met less than an hour ago, and spent all of our time together counting cows, so, no, he hadn't told me about his wife, and said simply, no, my friend, but I'd like to hear it now. The story of Beverly, as told by Abel. I'm the luckiest man that has ever lived, though, to be sure, my luck was short-lived and the days since have been filled with despair. Her name was Beverly. I met her 15 years ago at a farmer's market in town, where I had set up a booth to sell my milk. She was the most beautiful girl I had ever seen, and indeed, by her years, she was not much more than a girl. She was 22, and I was 42. Beverly was fresh out of college, and, besides being beautiful, she was smart, and charming. Meanwhile, I was. Well, you see me now, sir. I am not much to look at, nor have I ever been mistaken for having a great deal of wit. Got any free samples? She asked. Of your milk? I wasn't in the business of giving away free milk, but for her, I couldn't refuse. I was powerless against Beverly's charm that day, and every day thereafter. And so I reached into my cooler, brought out a bottle of my finest, and handed it to her. She unscrewed the lid and sniffed the milk. At once, the ironic smile fell from her face and she grew serious. She lifted the bottle to her lips, took a small drink, and set it down on the display table. "That is the best, purest milk I've ever tasted in my life," she said. "I need to see the farm where this milk was made." I closed up my booth immediately. No amount of money was worth passing up the opportunity to spend even a moment with this woman. You have to understand, I had no intentions other than simply being in her presence for a time. How could I pretend to anything more than that? I gave her a tour of my humble farm, tongue-tied the entire time, simply nodding or shaking my head when she asked me a question. At the end of the tour, she announced that this is what she wanted to do. "How do you mean?" I asked, speaking for the first time since I laid eyes on her. "I want to stay here, on this farm, and live with you. That's how I want to learn about life." "You don't even know my name," I said, instantly regretting my foolish objection. But I also knew, well and true, that good fortune doesn't just fall from the sky into the laps of folk like me. "Well then tell me your name," she said, taking my hand in hers. "Sir, I apologize. I will come to the point more directly. But I did feel the need to tell you how it started. It wasn't like they say in town. I didn't drug her and brainwash her and whatever else they claim. Nor do I blame them for thinking that I did. There is little else that could explain why she chose to be my wife. Unless what she said was actually true. Beverly was convinced that she was an alien, from outer space. No, that's not quite right. Not right at all. I apologize, and admit that I never quite understood what she was trying to say. She told me that inner space might be a better term for where she came from, and that people had the wrong idea about aliens. They don't live out there on some planet trillions of light years away. They live in the dimensional folds that are right in front of our faces, but that we can't see. I don't know what that means, sir, but it's what she said. Do you think I'm a monster? For taking advantage of someone delusional? It never felt that way. She worked hard every day, and she was happy, and insisted that it's where she wanted to be, and what she wanted to be doing. I never thought that she was an alien, though sometimes I almost did, because she had the story down in such dizzying details, which were lost on me. Mostly, I didn't think about it one way or the other. We were together every day, and happy, and it didn't matter to me if she was an alien or just a person who thought she was an alien. What mattered was that I loved her, and, though I could scarcely believe it, she seemed to love me. Sir, I am rambling again. Forgive me. 5 years ago, Beverly disappeared. Before she did, she said a lot of strange things. I didn't understand most of them, but can recall a few. Suddenly, standing here in front of these cows. She told me that she had received a warning from her home world. There was another type of alien, different from her kind, that was planning on coming to our world. This must be stopped at all costs, she said, or they will destroy your world. She took my hand. I mean our world, Abel. They'll destroy our world. Why would they want to destroy our beautiful world? I asked. They won't want to. They just will. They'll come here, thinking that they understand it enough, but they won't understand it enough. They will try to blend in order to study the world, but they won't quite blend in. And they'll keep coming, one after the other, until they've filled the entire world. I don't know what exactly it will look like in this dimension, but it's played out before, in other places, and it's brutal and more awful than any other end you can imagine. They will keep coming, and they will change the world haphazardly, until it's no longer recognizable. We don't own this world, I pointed out. Who are we to say what can and can't come into it? You don't understand, Abel. This will be the end of love. These things will keep pouring in until love is literally no longer possible, and the concept itself no longer exists. It will be very, very bad. I didn't understand what she was saying, except I knew that it would be bad if love didn't exist anymore, and I didn't want that to happen. I have to stop them, Beverly said. They're coming tonight. The intelligence on this is clear. And since they only know this world from picking up on my communications, they'll be coming here. To this farm. She put her face in her hands and wept, while I patted her shoulder. Then she dried her eyes and went on. Yes. I led them here, so I must stop them. I'll go with you, I said, not liking the idea of Beverly going traipsing off into the night alone. Bears roam these woods, as I'm sure you're well aware, sir. Very well, said my wife. But I don't know what will happen out there, and before we go, I want you to know something. You taught me what love is. I didn't know before. And it's the best thing that has ever happened to me, and no matter what happens, I want you to know that, and remember it. I love you too, I said. Then, with almost superhuman speed, she bonked me over the head with a frying pan, and I was out. They said that I must have killed her, and buried her body somewhere. They brought the dogs in. They brought the search parties in. But they never found anything. Nor do I, and I have been looking for her ever since. Sir, I will spare you any more of my blubbering. I will spare you from hearing of the heartache I've endured these past 5 years. I am not telling you this to win your pity, but rather because it has occurred to me that maybe Beverly wasn't delusional after all. And maybe what she told me has something to do with these cows. Back to the cows. I stood with my mouth open for some time after Abel had finished telling me his story. I had been studying him the entire time and, as always, he seemed completely earnest. Still, I wouldn't have given what he said any serious consideration, if it hadn't been for those cows. Those fucking non-blinking, egg-laying cows that kept appearing out of nowhere. I turned now to look at them. During the time it took for Abel to tell his story, the things had more than doubled in number. There were 30 of them now, along with 15 of those neon eggs rattling around, starting to show hairline cracks. I wondered what was inside of them. At the same time, I didn't want to find out. Of all the apocalyptic scenarios I could have imagined, having the world overrun by transdimensional cows was probably the dumbest. That meant that it probably was the most likely to actually happen to us. I considered the possibility that maybe we deserved it. Maybe it was our time. And maybe we did deserve it. But something about Abel's story had moved me. As a species, human beings were dumb, selfish, and capable of incredible cruelty. But we were also capable of kindness and love. And that seemed worth preserving. We have to stop them, Abel. I think this is what Beverly was talking about. I don't know what happened to her, and I'm sorry for your loss. But we have to stop these cows. Oh, I could never harm a cow, sir. They're not really cows though. They just look like cows. What are they then? Hopefully something that burns, Abel. Hopefully something that burns. I will have nightmares about that day for the rest of my life. We rode Abel's tractor to his barn and loaded up with every can of gasoline that he had. When we returned to the pasture, the cows had again more than doubled in number. I didn't bother to count them, but there had to be over 100 by that point. We went around dousing them with fuel. It was awful. The cows just let it happen and stared at us with blank, innocent eyes. Tears were flowing freely down Abel's rough face, and I had to fight them back myself, trying to focus on the fact that these things were not what they seemed. After the cows and the eggs were attended to, we soaked every inch of grass in the pasture. Then we lit the whole shebang on fire. It was only as they burned, with cow flesh crackling in the flames, that we saw what these creatures really looked like. It was clear then that they were not of this world, or even this reality. They were an amalgamation of body parts and ideas. That's the only way that I can describe it. You looked at them, and saw green and purple tentacles, writhing around the concept of death and infinity. They were covered in fur, and scales, and mathematical formulas. They had mechanical gears inside of them, and sinewy muscles. Fat and gristle and glass and triangles. But no love. Their burning bodies smelled like cooking hamburgers and sterility. It sounds impossible and insane, but it's the truth. When there was nothing but ashes in front of us, I turned to Abel. I don't know if it was enough, but it was all we could do. We did our best, buddy, and we did what we had to. You did wonderfully. I whipped my head around and there standing behind us was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, dressed in long white robes. Her beauty hurt, and now I did start crying, uncontrollably. Beverly, cried Abel. My love. Where have you been? Oh, it doesn't matter. You're here now. I've been at the gate, said Beverly. For 5 years according to time here, much longer in reality. I was able to hold them off for a long time. But finally it got to where I couldn't do it myself anymore. They broke through. And they will again. Unless. Oh, I never wanted it to come to this. Unless what? I asked. What do we have to do to stop these things for good? Beverly smiled sadly. It broke my heart to see her sad. I didn't know her at all, and she was apparently some kind of transdimensional being herself. But it still broke my heart. I thought that the memory of love would be enough, she said. And for a time, it was. But it's not anymore. I need someone there. I need an active, living love. You need Abel, I said. Beverly nodded. The gate is a terrible place, fully of horrors beyond comprehension. I never wanted Abel to have to go there. I wanted him to stay here, and be happy with his cows, and his memory of love. But I need him. I will go anywhere with you, my love. Anywhere. Abel and Beverly embraced, and, for a moment, the evening sky seemed to brighten. When they separated, Beverly turned to me. "Thank you for helping Abel. If you hadn't passed by the farm at that exact moment, I'm confident that it would have been too late for this world." She reached out her hand. I took it in mine and felt a gushy warmth course through me. "Don't mention it," I said. "Thank you, sir," said Abel, overcome with emotion. "Sir, I must, thank you." He wrapped his meaty arms around me and pulled me in for a bear hug. "You take care now, buddy," I said, patting him on the back. Then, Abel went to stand by Beverly's side. They held hands, and began to melt into each other, intertwining, turning inside out into one gooey mess of flesh and organs and everything else we're made of. Then they were gone. I have not been the same since that day. As I've said, there are the nightmares. Nightmares of unfathomable beings filling every inch of this world, and nightmares of the gate. Somehow, I can see the gate clearly in my mind as I sleep. I think it must be because Beverly touched me. It is an awful place, infinite, and full of infinite terrors. Then too, there is the loneliness. I've witnessed a love more powerful than I thought possible, but I'm not a part of it. I long to be a part of it. But I live in alienation, alone both physically. I quit my job and moved to the desert, and in the knowledge of just how small and fragile this reality is. The other day, I made the decision that it's time to move on and live my life again. That meant going back to Abel's farm for the first time, and making peace with what happened there. When I arrived, I stood looking at the pasture. The grass had never grown back, and, I knew, never would. I stood there for a long time, replaying that day in my head. I thought back to Abel's story. About how he had lived with Beverly for 10 years. He had known that tremendous love every day for 10 years. And then, when she disappeared, he was suddenly alone. But he hadn't given up. He'd gone on tending to his cows. He'd gone on taking care of Adeline and Bertha and Zelda, taking photographs with them every night. That gave me strength. After several hours there, I felt refreshed, in the deepest way, and I decided to go along my old hiking path, as a symbolic way to restart my life. I wasn't very far along the trail when I saw it. It was impossible to miss. A fragment of a shell, neon green, unlike anything occurring naturally in this world. We had missed one. It must have rolled away in the chaos. I bent down and picked it up between my fingers. It was still warm. I heard a branch snap deep in the woods and then heard a voice deep in my mind, cold and alien. "That wasn't very nice, what you did to us." I got out of there, fast.